Um, Hello, everyone. So, my first unpopular opinion, and I've said this before publicly, is that Sebastian Vettel is not a top 10 all time driver.
Oh, and you said that on a podcast with two Vettel stands. Oh, this is not going to go.
Yeah,
Shots
and
fired.
it's who I've got above him. Like, if you said to me top 11, then yeah, he'd be 11.
Who
Okay.
can you give us a taste of who you have above him, or if you want to give the whole list, that's fine. But even
I
just
won't
Yeah,
give the
go for it.
whole. I mean, the top five is kind of fairly self-explanatory. Lewis, Michael, Ayrton, Fangio, all that. So 10, I've got Fernando, and that's where it kind of hinges basically. 9, I've
Yeah.
got Max,
right,
and then I've got Nicky, and then Jackie and Jim Clark. So above
Okay.
him there. So over one lap, Seb is like near the top.
yeah,
Brutally fast over one lap. We saw that he could exploit a machine beautifully. I feel like I hate to say this, like, because I do respect Seb a lot, but he was a.
Unpopular opinions. It's blatantly biased. Racing
I know.
podcast.
I know.
plus you're
Go for
British,
it.
so we'll just call it British bias in the notes.
Well,
anyway.
I mean, yes. Ben Sulayem makes it clear that everything is British bias. So there you go. No, I felt like he was more of a car merchant than Lewis and Max have been. Lewis and Max have won races from way down the grid. They've won races in cars that weren't necessarily the best, whereas Seb kind of needed the car to be in a certain window for it to work. And the reason I put Fernando above him, yes, they had two title fights. Seb won both of them. So you're like, where's the logic in having Fernando above? I'm convinced that equal machinery, Fernando beats Seb. 2010, okay, was probably the closest they ever got to having equal machinery, but the Red Bull over one lap always gave Seb an advantage. 2012, Fernando had zero right to be anywhere near that World Championship. And
Agreed.
yet, through sheer force of will, he got there. Seb needed a car to get him through 4 races, and he needed Grosjean and somebody else to yeet Fernando off in Spa and Suzuka. And I think wheel to wheel, I think Fernando is better than Seb. I think if you want to see Seb's shortcomings wheel to wheel, go look at 2018. He and Lewis I thought were pretty evenly matched on pace, but Lewis more than often than not got on top of him. You saw the spins, you saw everything else. And I think that was the season that he lost the championship more than Ferrari screwed it up for him, whereas 2017 was
Now
different
it's
to
going
that.
to be fun.
I was agreeing until there.
So yeah, I mean, not to take away from how good Lewis was in 2018 as well. Like we can't ignore that. But yeah, I just think Fernando's all-round car sense and his ability to strategize behind the wheel, which is so rare even in today's current crop of drivers, is just second to none. And I think if they'd been teammates or if they'd been in equal cars, I think he beats Seb, and I think Seb would have him over one lap, but over the course of a season with wheel-to-wheel racing and Fernando's defensive skills as well, he would beat Seb, and that's why I have him above.
Okay,
Yeah, but
there's a few
there's-
points to that,
Go
isn't
for
there?
it. Yeah.
I was just going to say there's a few points to that because I do agree that there's a good few drivers ahead of Seb. As much as I actually was a huge Vettel fan, I think Casual was as well.
I still am.
Like that's the last driver I was a proper fanboy of. Since he left, I'm kind of just a very kind of neutral jump between fan. I do agree, though. I do think that Fernando Alonso in the right career choices would have been like many times over more of a world champion. And I think in head to head, after watching 2012, I agree on the Fernando Alonso point. I think Alonso is incredible there. I'm trying to think off the top of my head, would I put him as low as like 10 or 11 though in a list? I'm not sure. Probably for me, it wouldn't be top 5 of all time.
Yeah, I
because
think
there's so
the
many.
The point is, the debate is
How
turning
low?
into
How low do you put it?
Yeah, because the debate is turning into Alonso versus
Well,
Vettel, because
that's why I think there's a
you
couple
can
of
flip
points,
it
isn't
either
there?
ways. The point is, who do you have above him? A Jim Clark,
So
Jackie
he-
Stewart, who else?
So he said Schumacher, Jim Clark, Jackie Stewart, Nicky Lauda, Lewis
No,
Hamilton.
from 6
So,
to 9. Who were the drivers?
6 to 10 was no, I need to remember this. Was Clark, Jackie, Lauda, Max at 9, and then Fernando at 10.
Okay.
See, when you go all time, it does make it difficult, doesn't it? Because I don't know which of those I would put.
Yeah, I mean, if it's drivers I've seen,
I don't
Seb
think I'll
easily
put
top 10.
Jacques
But
Stewart.
Yeah.
yeah,
On that
Even if you said
because
modern
for me-
Formula One since like the late 90s, even he'd be in
Yeah.
there.
oh, absolutely, yeah.
Ideally, it has. What I try to do is, I don't think I can judge a driver like a Jim Clark or a Fangio on the same level as the current drivers, because I think the cars are different. Jochen Rindt, a Graham Hill, the cars were very different from that era, and it makes it very hard for me to, make direct comparisons. So yes, if
Yeah,
someone
but
comes in and
I think
says
just-
that Fangio is the GOAT, okay, fine. If you think like that, go for it.
But as he said, though, if you were saying of all time, then you kind of have to do that. So in that list, I
Yes.
think he's kind of accurate that, you know what I mean? Like,
But I
I
struggle
kind of
with
get
it,
where he's
right?
coming
How
from
do
on
I
that
make
point.
the comparison? For me, Alonso versus Vettel comparison.
I think
I would
Alonso.
think, and again, it might sound very controversial. I think the Alonso, Vettel, Hamilton era is entirely dependent on the team they ended up with.
Can
Vettel
I
ended up
ask
in a
one
team-
question Can I ask one question quickly of both of you then?
Yeah.
Because this isn't my unpopular opinion, but it will be an unpopular opinion regardless. I think in the same cars over the last 20 years, Alonso beats both Hamilton and Vettel. The question then becomes, is it Vettel or Hamilton? It's just, I think when it comes to just out and out racecraft, strategizing everything, Alonso's biggest mistake was repeatedly throwing his career in the bin by, messing around with teams. But after watching him in 2012, that's the season where I think that kind of lines everything up, because that season, just everything, he was just spectacular. And I think if you put all three of them, for example, in that Mercedes run for the 7 years, if you could do that, I do think Alonso wins out for most of those years, personally.
I think
Maybe that's a crazy opinion as well, but I think so.
I would say Lewis personally.
Fanboy. No, I'm joking.
Yeah. I make no secret of the fact that I'm a Lewis fan.
Yeah, I know.
That's
I'm
why
only
you're
joking.
here, by the way.
Yeah, I know. People think I'm not. I am.
You're not a nutter. You're a fan. That's
yes.
the difference.
No, I think Lewis, I mean, it depends when they were in their career. Like Lewis, towards the end of his McLaren stint and the first year or two at Mercedes, you could make the argument that Alonso may beat him. But as he got on with that team, I mean, I think 2018, 19, 20 was the best of Lewis we saw.
I think that's the best part, actually. The best way you can actually arrange the whole thing. And that's why I made
Yeah, because
the
you've got
argument
ups
that
and downs of drivers, haven't you? So they're
precisely. And
yeah.
I think what we tend to discount is the team they're a part of. When Vettel, and I think the Vettel's entire career is actually the testimony of how important a team is. It's not that Vettel has not been in tough championships. He's been in tough championships. But everyone has a very, you can say, recency bias. That's why 17, 18 comes up. He fucked up. He had this and that. There's a difference. He also had probably a much tougher time in 2010 and 2012. Those were the championships where he was consistently either throttled by reliability or had some other issues with the car or whatever. He overcame those and still won those championships. The reason was the team that he was a part of, in the background, it was not falling apart. The 17-18 seasons, if you want to divide, I think actually there's something that Joe Rogan, I mean, a right-wing nutter these days.
Are you quoting Joe Rogan on an F1 podcast?
I mean, just
How?
keywords. Maybe
I'm
it helps
excited
with
to
the
see how
reach.
this. I'm really
Yeah.
excited to see how you do this.
Yeah, because in mixed martial arts, it says one thing, that how he judges a fighter, an MMA fighter, is how he was at his peak. And if I
Yeah.
have to judge these drivers, I'll judge how they are when everything was aligned. So for Vettel, when everything was aligned, was probably 2013, where I think throughout that season, except the race in Hungary, I don't think I can pinpoint any other point in that entire season where he made any mistake or left points on the table.
And I would say as
Throughout
well,
that
arguably as well, maybe this is partly because I'm a Vettel fan, but I've always said I think 2018 was probably Lewis's absolute best season
And
like,
I'll
in
tell
a
you
fight
about,
as well. He
and,
was
and about
brilliant that
2018, I'll
season.
tell you, there are at least 3 or 4 races minimum where Lewis left points on the table.
Maybe, but I do think it was an
The
incredible season run.
the reason why I say that is I actually did the whole thing where I compared the primes. For Alonso it was 2022, for Vettel it was 2013, for Lewis it was 2018. Arguably, I feel 2019 was a season where he was more
Alonso,
complete
you mean 2012,
driver.
right? Not 2022.
2012.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I was wondering. Yeah.
What happened in 2022?
Nothing.
He was
He was in
outscored by
Alpine.
Ocon, so yeah.
Yeah.
So nothing good happened if he was at Alpine. So, anyways, when I compared these three eras, what I saw was the most complete season out of all three at their peaks was Vettel. When everything was aligned, he was a driver that in the entire season there was one mistake, and actually he talked about it at the Autosports year-end whatever award show, where he said that when he finished, I think third or fourth in that race in Hungary where Lewis won, Kimi was second, and I think Vettel was third. And Marco came to his room and said that you should have won that race. And from that point onwards, he went on to win the last 9 races. And that kind of peak is what I actually use to define a driver. And that's why, why I've actually had this thing where I think there have been eras where Michael was great. He was someone who stood out from the entire grid. You could tell that he was the best driver. When Michael retired, Alonso took that pedestal for a season, probably 2006. When Lewis came in, it was back. It was back to a point where you had two drivers that were right up there with each other. Then we had Vettel come in. And from that point onwards until now, probably until Max in 2021, we've had these three drivers who have not really, you can say, put them stand out in a way that the car is not a factor. With Michael, we knew car was not a factor. In case of Alonso, he won the 2 titles when he had the car. Lewis won the titles when he had the car. Vettel won the titles when he had the car.
Yeah.
And that's why
I
find
think
it hard to, differentiate all three of them.
And in fairness, the car in F1, regardless of whether people want to admit it or not, the car is 90%. Like, even if you wanted to be generous, it's 80%, but a lot will say 90%. So I think the car, obviously, but I do think like there is, if you broke it into a couple of different arguments from the opinion there, I kind of agree on one, which is I do agree that Fernando is ahead of Vettel. I'm just not sure how high up that list I would put Alonso then, because I do think Alonso is a talent who, if he had have made some good career decisions, could have been just spectacular throughout, but unfortunately, was up against the Ron Dennis. The only thing I disagree with, I think, is I think the only part of that I disagree with is I think I wouldn't call Vettel a car merchant just because there was certain times in his career where I think he was just spectacular. But then you could say as well, like, you can argue that all the time then, can't you? Because 2014 he was beaten by Daniel Ricciardo, so there's that argument to make, Like 2017 and 2018, as much as I do think winning in a Ferrari since John Todd left is probably the most mentally draining thing you can do, because it's just a nightmare of a team. And that's going to be interesting next year.
Being with Ferrari alone, or being a lead driver,
we've seen it break so many spirits. And being a fan of Ferrari breaks so many spirits.
I mean,
I just bought this cap to help Leclerc.
By now Leclerc is dead inside. Just let's be honest.
He's waiting for Lewis to turn up next year.
It's going to be really interesting, especially because of the age difference as well. Like, I know, like, we've seen drivers drive brilliantly into, like, as they age, but it's a huge age difference, and Leclerc is one of the best on the grid, so it's going to be. But then I suppose against Russell as well, but I'll get onto that later on.
Coming back to the whole thing,
I think I kind of half agree, basically.
Look, if the argument is Alonso better than Vettel, I think it's going to flip-flop, because if you're looking at rating the drivers entirely on driver ability, then I think I would put Lewis, Alonso, Vettel on the same platform. I don't think I can differentiate between them. But there is a big difference when we are talking about the grades, because the success comes
Alonso,
into it,
Hamilton,
and Lewis has that success.
It's Alonso, Hamilton,
7 titles,
Vettel.
100 wins. How does anyone
It's not
compare
that difficult. Easy. Alonso, Hamilton, Vettel. It's easy.
Well, I'd go Hamilton, Alonso, Vettel, but
I find it hard. I actually find, for me, it's all three of them on the same level. That's the era that we had, and it started in 2000. I mean, Alonso has been there since. He's been there
2001.
forever, 2001. So there was 6 years where he fought with Kimi for supremacy, and when I think Kimi won in 2007, and then he just gave up.
Kimi Räikkönen's just
Yeah.
a brilliant example of just he did a Rosberg but continued to take a check. That's basically what he did. He just went, yep, that's done
and
now.
some
I'm
very
over.
fat checks. He actually
Yes.
he actually
Nearly bankrupted
Lotus, right?
Lotus. Yeah.
There's one other thing that I want to sort of throw in as a differentiator, and you look at their rivals as well and how they stacked up against them. Now, Lewis has gone up against Fernando, Kimi. I would chuck Felipe Massa in there because they had a championship fight. He's gone up against Jensen in the same car.
Yeah.
He's gone up against Rosberg in the
Nico.
same car.
Yeah.
Vettel, a lot. I said Alonso already. Max as well, and he's beaten those guys. He's just done it time and time again from day one in his career. Seb beat Alonso, beat Lewis when he had the car, but then when it was equal in those 2 years, he didn't beat Lewis. Alonso.
I won't say in 17, 18 it was equal. I cannot agree with that. Cannot agree with that.
I knew this. I knew
If
this
you're-
was going to be the fight point here.
Yeah, if you're living in if you're driving a caravan and that caravan is on fire, and the other guy is also in a caravan, it's fine, it's working perfectly. It's not the same fight, and I think Peter Windsor actually judged it perfectly, and and as you guys can see, Jason has fucked off. He'll be back in a minute. So,
I've got headphones. I can still hear everything.
yeah. Okay, no, if you want, you can just take a look. Peter Windsor actually made a very perfect point, and I think it was more in relation to Max versus Charles, where he said that Charles cannot beat Max, and he made the argument in 2022 or 3, something like that, just in the middle of it. And the reason he said was Max is part of Red Bull, where every single gear, every single grain is perfectly aligned. And when he's driving, he's 100% focused on driving. He has GP in his ear and he's the one making the calls. Strategy is perfect. Everything is perfect. Everything is working. Charles, he has no fucking idea what is going to happen. What strategy will be there. There are people fighting in the background. He does not know if his team principal will be the same next year. There is nothing working perfectly.
It's dry. Box for inters.
Yeah. I mean, he doesn't know if he'll be on the dry tire in the wet or what's going to happen. And I think Vettel went through the same thing. 2017, first it started with Sergio Marchionne, who basically came in and openly said, I think it was in Monza when they lost, where he actually came out and said that it's a disgrace for Ferrari to lose to Mercedes at Monza. And then wheels started falling off. 2018, everyone knows what the fuck was going on. There was
I mean, obviously there is the
fighting in the background.
Yeah, there is the team politics going on, absolutely. But when you look at the cars that they had, I mean, 2017, okay, look, Seb had the Singapore incident, and that's on him. But there was massive strategy errors in qualifying and everything else, and it just went all imploded in on itself. On 2018,
I mean, the power unit failed. A lot of things. I mean, I don't think 17 car was actually on par with Mercedes, at least.
In terms of reliability, no, but I think in speed,
Pace-wise, probably.
I think they could have, if they didn't have those technical gremlins, because 2017 was also a big reg change as well. They could have got the job done. 2018, everyone says, the big turning point was Hockenheim. No, it wasn't.
No, it wasn't.
It was not, because he then went and won in Spa. Here comes Sebastian Vettel. Singapore was the key moment there, and that was Lewis just delivered a lap at a track that they didn't expect to have pace at, and then Seb put in a stinker by his standards, and after that you saw the spins, you saw the wheel to wheel. He'd already had one spin in Monza. That was Ferrari's fault because they screwed up qualifying, but he was pushing so hard that eventually he literally span out of championship contention. So if that hadn't have happened, if that lap doesn't happen, I mean, I actually trace Seb's down curve in performance to that qualifying session in Singapore. You could see him
in Q2 in Singapore?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but
Vettel came on the radio. He said the car is not in the right window, and at that very moment it was, and people forget, Q2, Lewis stopped as well. Lewis was the fastest again.
Yeah.
People don't remember that. The thing is, by that time, Ferrari had mistimed Vettel's outlap or something. His tires were not in the right window, and he was struggling with the car in Q2. And the thing is, how I remember is I actually went back and saw the season and everything because just was analyzing some things. It started going wrong in Q2 for them. And every time the problem with Ferrari is when everything needs to be nailed, which was what Mercedes was doing, to be honest. They nailed everything. Monza, Ferrari was supposed to storm and win easily. But basically they self-immolated. And that's how Ferrari operates. And we all forget, I mean, there were four or five races worth upgrades that Ferrari took off. And then Kimi won in Austin. Something like that happened. When that is happening, you're not really fighting for a title. You're basically, I mean, you're just there, you're participating.
I do think 2018 though is, like, I've said it a while now, I do think 2018 is like Ferrari. The simple thing is, I do think in 2018 Lewis was just the better driver of the two in that particular season. The question I would have is, given I've seen how many drivers Ferrari has absolutely mentally destroyed, I'd love to know what was going on in the background, because like
it's there.
I think we don't
did
like
the entire thing, and they've actually mentioned these things where Vettel.
But what I'm saying is, I think we
the same authority that Michael had, and what happened.
But I think the point is, it's like we don't take into account a lot of the time how important it is, like mentality for the drivers, and obviously, like, you know, that's on the driver as well. Like it's up to the driver to put themselves in a mental state, you know, like you see Lewis just completely destroy Bottas's mentality halfway through the season every year, you know, but that's on Bottas to fix that. So it's not really an excuse for Vettel, but I would love to know, like, what was happening in the background, you know.
The reason I
do think Lewis was better.
Singapore is such an important moment is because you could, I
he wasn't
didn't know about the issues
Lewis
in
wasn't
Q2.
supposed to win, by the way.
Lewis wasn't
in
supposed to
Singapore.
be on pole. He wasn't supposed to do the lap that he did. You know, we all look back and just go like, But
that was
after that qualifying
amazing.
session, you could see Seb kind of just look at the screens and go,
Jesus,
I can't beat this guy.
Yeah.
I can't beat this guy. That was the moment. And after that, just it went downhill.
Precisely. One more thing. There's one thing that continues to be said. Where Vettel could not win from back of the grid or something like that. And I think there's one thing that we actually need to keep in mind when we talk about something like this. Until 2014, Lewis had not won a race beyond top 4 or top 3, something like this. Yeah, I remember. The first time he did was British GP, where he had an issue with in qualifying where he didn't set the final lap and Rosberg got pole. I think Rosberg got DNF'd or something in the race and Lewis won.
I can't remember.
So there's one key thing which we tend to forget. First is, when it came to Vettel, he nailed qualifying. It was probably from 2010 to 2013 he had he was on in 2011 he leveled Nigel Mansell, 15 pole positions, right? And I think there were 19 races that season, 19 or 20 races. That's almost 75% pole position rate what he had. He didn't make mistakes in qualifying, so that's why he started up front. That's the big thing.
True.
If he can, and I mean, if we talk about him being able to come through the field, he showed it in Abu Dhabi 2012.
Baxty, you've really upset casual here, I think.
I mean, that's what everyone wants, right?
That's the whole point
He
of
came
this
from
pod,
the back
isn't
of the
it?
grid, finished P3.
Yeah, no, I mean, okay, that 2012 Red Bull at that point was an absolute rocket ship.
What was the Mercedes 2014?
Well, it was a rocket ship, but you know, but also 2012
that was the car
more.
in which he won. Lewis won. Before that, he didn't. So
Yeah.
car
But
makes big
he also in 2018 he came from 16th on the grid when in a race that had Seb not crashed out, he doesn't win. In Hockenheim, and he came from 14th, and then
I mean, he would have finished either in that race. He would have finished from 16th. He would have been
P2.
even in a normal race. He would have been P4, P3, something like this, right? In a worst case scenario.
Worst case scenario, P4. If Seb doesn't crash in those conditions, it's P2.
P2.
Which probably wouldn't have helped. I still think Lewis would have won the championship that year, but I think it would have made it closer, certainly. Yeah. But
I mean, the point is, all of them being racers and stuff like this, wanted to get that out. Anyways,
I think the obvious one, the winner of every season, obviously is the car. Let's just call it a day.
Yeah.
Just say, look,
unless it's 2024 where Max Verstappen wins in a slower car. So